In this video, we'll take a look at number 3. So number 3 asks you to take the social issues that you've identified in number 2 and to pick one to focus on. To illustrate the thinking process that you should be engaging in with this project, I am going to use an example. So my example is depression as the social issue. And now in number 3, what I want you to do is to pick 2 theoretical perspectives that we've learned about in this course. In chapter 2 is where you'll find the most information about all 8 of the theoretical perspectives that are used by social workers. I want you to pick 2 that you think could describe the cause or the development of this social issue. So in my example with depression, what makes people depressed? And how does depression develop in a person? So on the next few slides, let's think about 2 perspectives, behavioral and humanistic, that can be used to think about depression. So as I said, we're going to look at the behavioral perspective and the humanistic perspective to think about, from these 2 perspectives, if I were a behaviorist or if I were a humanist, what would I say is the cause of depression? So to be able to do that, let's look at the main ideas from both of these perspectives for a minute. So in the behavioral perspective, there is a focus on the concrete and on learning. So behaviorists think that behaviors learn whenever people interact with their environment, and that we can manipulate the environment to change people's behaviors. And this can be used in interventions like cognitive behavioral therapy, with cognitive processing theory, dialectical behavioral theory. These are all, very widely used approaches for depression. And the idea is that if we change our behavior, then we can change our quality of life. The humanistic perspective looks more at relationships and a person's experience. And so the humanistic approach looks more at the person as an individual. It's much more focused on things like empathy, dignity and worth of a person, being non-directive, and letting people make their own decisions. But this is all in the context of relationships. So if we look at the behavioral and the humanistic perspective, we may say from the behavioral perspective that depression is caused by behavior, that emotion, behavior, and thoughts are connected. That is a big tenet of cognitive behavioral therapy or theory, is that those 3 things are connected. So from a behavioral standpoint, the idea is if we change our behavior, then we can change our emotions and our thoughts. Or we can change our thoughts, like in cognitive therapy, and that should be able to change our emotions. Some critics of the behavioral perspective would say that this does not fully account for the inner experience of a person. Even though behaviorally they may make changes, how do we know that their emotions have changed? And behaviorists are not as concerned with the emotional component of things. Also, you'll notice here that it's very individualistic, whereas with the humanistic perspective, it's more focused on relationships. So, for the behavioral perspective, you might argue that depression is caused by behaviors or it's caused by faulty thinking. In the cognitive therapy world, these would be like cognitive distortions, and that leads to depression. In the humanistic perspective, depression would be thought of a lack of validation and not having relationships that are validating um, and meaningful to a person so that they can grow. In the next step, we will choose one of these theories to move forward with. And when we move forward, we're going to think about an intervention that a social worker could do with someone with depression that is founded in the perspective that has been chosen.